Poštovani gledaoci, dobar vam dan. Gledate N1 na 1. Mi u nastavku razgovaramo sa novinarem i publicistom Royem Gutmanom, koji je u ratu izvještavao iz Bosne i Hercegovine. Također autor je brojnih knjiga, između ostalih A Witness to Genocide, koja upravo i govori o ratnim dešavanjima u Bosni i Hercegovini. Dobitnik i brojnih nagrada i priznanja, između ostalih i Pulitzera, upravo za izvještaje iz ratne Bosne i Hercegovine. Pored toga, on je i počasni građanin grada Sarajeva. Trenutno ima adresu u Istanbulu, odakle izvještava o dešavanjima na Bliskom Istoku. Mr. Gutman, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
What brings you here more than 2 decades after the end of the war?
Well, an invitation. Dr. Ganic asked me, he's been after me for some time to come and speak. And how could I say no? But I said to him, look, I want to talk about Syria, because I don't think people understand it, and I cover it, and the Bosnian people really need to know about it, because I think it's the Bosnia of our day. And he said, fine.
But how does it feel each time you return to Bosnia?
I love it. I mean, Bosnia is like a second home for me, and the people are not just wonderful, but, you know, they really are like family. And you know, the reception is very nice, but it's just, there's something about this place that attracts me. And so I will take an excuse to come back here anytime.
You are the winner of Pulitzer Prize for your war reporting in Bosnia and Herzegovina. How was it like back then in the 90s to see all the atrocities you were reporting about, especially concentration camps, because you were the first reporter who actually informed the world about what was going on in Manjača and Omarska?
Well, you know, as a journalist, you're used to reporting bad news, and you're used to reporting scandals and crimes, but I never imagined I could be reporting that story at this time, because I knew the old Yugoslavia. I knew Bosnia from years earlier, but I didn't really think that anybody would ever do anything like that. And I had to convince myself by finding witnesses or participants or people who were involved, people who were prisoners there, to talk about it. And I just felt so depressed, so upset. How could this be going on? That I thought, well, at least if I do the story and I take the risk myself, that because I'm not always necessarily there, that at least somebody would do something about it, and I'm glad I did it.
Which experience changed you, essentially?
You know, the whole experience of the war in Bosnia changed me. It took me some time to digest what I had seen and even written about. It took me maybe a couple of years after the war to realize that Bosnia was described as a war, but it was really a war crime masquerading as a war, and that therefore I should write about the crimes. And I intuitively did, but I didn't understand quite why I was doing it until afterwards. And then I realized that this is the essence of what was happening. And it was important that somebody, you know, do that and focus on it instead of listening to the so-called statesmen and their so-called diplomacy and the phony, you know, efforts they were making to end the war, which were not serious at all.
Even though you won a Pulitzer Prize for your war reporting in Bosnia, there were many authors who contradicted you. For instance, Peter Brock, who in his book Media Cleansing Dirty Reporting Journalism wrote that you have been ignoring Serb victims and Serb context. What is your take on such accusations? Are we biased?
Well, you know, you have to make a judgment as a journalist in the middle of a war situation and try to figure out who is really doing what to whom. And I was fully aware of the allegations by the Serb side, the Bosnian Serb side, of crimes against them. But, you know, I went to several of the places. For example, I remember in Tuzla, they had claimed that the stadium was being used for Serb prisoners who were being beaten and mistreated there. So I went to the stadium in Tuzla. This is in the middle of the war in 1992. And I got a complete tour of every area of the stadium, and there was nobody there. And they were all phony allegations, frankly. It is true that some Serbs were mistreated, and that's not acceptable either. Nobody should be mistreated in war because there are rules and laws of war.
Do we lack reports on such stories?
I'm sorry?
Do we lack reports on such stories?
Well, we should be reporting them if they're true, but we should be checking them out first, and they didn't check out. Whereas, and I reached the conclusion that if you look at the allegations and you look at the reality, that it was about 95% was Serbs against Bosnians and Croats. It might have been 3% Croats against Serbs and Bosniaks, and maybe 2% of Bosniaks mistreating Serbs. So I think the job of a journalist in that situation is to reach your conclusion and check it out, test it, and it did test out. And so then the job is to report about who's doing the most war crimes. That is the center of it.
You probably have been following what has been going on in Balkans for all these years, and you probably know that at the end of the last month, Bosnia officially submitted the application for revision of judgment in the lawsuit of Bosnia and Herzegovina against Serbia. Back in 1997, the court decided that Serbia was not guilty for the genocide. Which outcome do you expect this time?
The International Court of Justice is not known to adjudicate cases like this very well. They do trade cases, they do allegations of all sorts, but to determine something like genocide is something probably beyond their capability. And secondly, I think in the initial submission, a lot of the evidence had not been gathered at that point of what really had happened. So there's a very good justification for sending back and demanding another look at it. Because with a genocide, you don't even find the evidence for years. For example, the mass graves. Many of them were only uncovered in the last 15 years or 10 or 15 years. And so in the initial submission, I don't think they were even present. And yet the mass graves, and there might be as many as 1,000 mass graves in northern Bosnia alone. Well, I don't think that they were known at the time. And yet the mass graves tell much of the story. So, of course, it's worth trying. But I hate to say it, but I think the evidence is that international justice really is not up to the job of determining what happened in that war.
So, but are you optimistic about the outcome?
I'd be very measured. I would not expect it because also international judges often have a political agenda. Somebody of the 20 judges or however many judges will have a political agenda, and that colors the ability to
which will not favor Bosnia.
Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but I don't know how much trust you can put in that kind of an institution.
Okay, so in March last year, one of the key figures of the war, Radovan Karadžić, was convicted of genocide in Srebrenica. Was that the outcome you were expecting?
Well, yes, in Srebrenica, but it seems to me that Karadžić's responsibility for what happened in Bosanska Krajina is total, and that what happened in Bosanska Krajina is a genocide also. The court did not make that judgment. The court said it didn't have the documentation to prove it, didn't have the recordings, the intercepts to record. But I'm sorry, look at what happened. How can you not have found that as the conclusion? So I think that was a flaw in the judgment. I think what they said in general and the facts that they brought to bear, was pretty solid. Although look at how many years after the events that this came out.
You have been extensively following the situation in Balkans all these years. So what is your perception on the political situation nowadays in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Did anything, in your opinion, essentially change?
Well, Bosnia is in a crisis right now. I think some of the crisis goes back to the war itself and the horrible ethnic cleansing, and the idea of dividing up a melting pot republic into ethnic entities it's a terrible idea. A disastrous idea, and that is the fundamental problem. Then there's the problem of, during the war, the Bosnian army tried to defend the country but didn't have the weapons to do it, and so the war went on and on and on. And then you have the Dayton Accords that the Americans supervised, and I think that with even the best will in the world, somebody else's peace conference is not really the way to deal with the war.
That was the thing you mentioned in front of the students here at the Sarajevo School of Science and Technology. You said that Dayton Agreement was not the best idea. What could have done better, in your opinion?
In my mind, if you have, I focus on war crimes as a theme. Mm-hmm. Why? Because that's what should not be happening in war. War happens, okay, crimes do not have to happen. But the Bosnian War was a war crime masquerading as a war. And so, you know, if you have crimes, they should be punished. They should not be rewarded. But Dayton basically put the criminals and the victims on the same plane and sort of tried to find a meeting ground. Well, there really cannot be a meeting ground between crime and victim. Mm-hmm. You've simply got to come down on the side of the victim and the side of the force or the people who want to uphold international law, not on those who want to break it. Dayton was one of these, you know, meeting halfway, and I think that was a bad concept.
Do you think that history could repeat itself here?
I think that the Bosnian people have lost any illusion that they may have had, and they certainly did have it in 1992, that the international community would come to their rescue, that the United Nations really stood for something, that the Europeans would come to their defense. I think everybody recognizes here that the only defense for Bosnia is that Bosnians have to defend themselves. And this is the way the world really is. We see this in Syria today as well. If people don't have the means to defend themselves, they really will become victims.
But who is the true defensive force in Syria nowadays? Because there are so many groups among Syrian rebels. Who is the one that should defend Syrian people?
Well, I happen to, you know, there are many Syrian forces, but most of them are locally based and homegrown. And they don't really get along with each other, and they don't have a common staff, and they don't have the organization even of the Bosnian army, frankly. And so it's very hard to pick and choose and say these are good and these are bad. I think that in general, the moderate opposition are just that. And I think those are people who want a modern state, who want a democratic state, who want a state of law, and who want to be part of international order. Those are people, and they're not perfect. They're but then again, who is? You have to basically make a choice, I think, if you're an outsider, if you're a government, maybe not us as journalists, but governments do, and you have to pick who are the best actors, who are the best players, who are the players who are going to uphold law, and go with them. And it's when we don't do that that I think we have chaos.
Now, which similarities and differences do you see between what was going on in Bosnia and what is happening in Syria nowadays?
Well, one of the biggest similarities is that war crimes are the characteristic of the Syrian war right now, carried out by the regime, and war crimes were the characteristic of the war in Bosnia, carried out by the Bosnian Serbs. And that these are really serious situations where you really, we as outsiders should not be looking on silently and watching it. This is one of the differences. In Bosnia, when we journalists wrote about the war crimes, it actually got international attention, it got governments interested, it got the public interested. But in Syria, one of the big differences is that for some reason or other, and maybe it's because it's the Middle East, maybe it's because Syria is a little-known country. It's not Europe. But whatever the reason, people are not paying attention. That's the biggest difference.
In your opinion, who is the one who commits the worst atrocities? Assad will say it's rebels' forces. Rebels will say it's Bashar al-Assad and his regime with Russia. In one of your articles, you also mentioned people protection units, Kurd people protection units. Why PG?
There's no question. It's the Assad regime and their various allies. The regime has used its own helicopters and warplanes to bomb civilians, to destroy hospitals, to destroy schools, to destroy mosques, to attack bread lines, to attack bakeries, to attack the means of survival for their own people. This is a government which is so convinced that it's got a right to stay in forever, to stay in power forever, that they will do anything to do it. And I think that government obeys no rules whatsoever. And unfortunately, they have very strong allies. Iran, which provides ground troops and which has collected militias from all over the Middle East to fight in Syria, and Russia, which bombs from the air. You know, and that combination of Iran and Russia is powerful, and they're all committing war crimes. Look, of course there are crimes by the Syrian opposition, but on the whole, the Syrian opposition are stuck in place. You know, they are defending their homes, defending their hometowns. They're not going after, they're not committing crimes. I don't think they even have much opportunity to.
Mm-hmm. But it all started back in 2011 as the part of the Arab Spring, when uprising against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad started, and now it's more than that. The conflict itself is very complicated. What could be the solution to the everlasting peace in that country? Well,
I'm not sure, because frankly, it's up to the Syrians to figure out their own future. It's not for us to tell them what kind of political system they should have or who should be the leadership. I do think that what outsiders and the international community can, where they should be weighing in, is on the war crimes. They should not only be condemning them, but they should be supporting the people who are trying to prevent them. And this is a huge mistake by the international community. That would level the playing field, because all that the regime, see, the regime does not have an army that actually will fight for it now anymore. It has to rely on militias brought in by Iran, basically, and the Russian bombing. So this is where the playing field is not level at all. The victims of the regime are civilians. The international community is watching this almost in silence. This is not going to bring a result. This is only going to perpetuate the war.
Mm-hmm. But why?
Well, because the regime it's willing to destroy its own country and expel its own people. It is shown that it's already eager to do this, if anything, to protect itself. But this is not what civilization is all about. Civilization is about protecting the innocent. It is protecting human life. And so the Western countries should at least uphold their own standards.
I will ask you to tell us something about your personal experience as reporter on a Syrian border. Syria Deeply, an independent digital media project, writes that you were taking pictures of refugees along the Syrian border and that you were detained and accused of spying. How did it happen?
Well, it was a very innocent thing. You know, I had heard that people were crossing the river. What is the name of the river? I'm trying to think. On the border, in a town called Haji Pasha, which is not very far from Reyhanli. I think the Orontes River. And I just thought I wanted to write a story that dramatized, or that brought home to the reading public what was going on there on the border, because people were risking their lives to either swim across or take a little boat across. And I hoped I could go down to the river and actually film, take pictures of that and just to even describe it. Well, I only got within about a half a mile or, about a kilometer of the river. And some local farmer who seemed to be working with the Turkish army spotted me with my camera, and I hadn't even taken a picture at that point, and called in the army, who arrested me. And they said I was in a forbidden zone. Now, there were no signs saying it was forbidden, so I didn't have any particular reason to not do it. And frankly, you just have to go out and do these things, whether or not there's a sign, just in the hopes that you can actually get a picture. It was a bit naive on my part, but I thought, but we all do this as journalists. We do it all the time. You try to calculate what's the safest thing you can do, and then you go out and do it. And so I was only detained for about 12 hours. They went through my computer, they questioned me at great length. They wanted to make sure, I think the army was concerned that I had crossed in illegally from Syria. And that would have been an offense, because I am an accredited journalist there, against Turkish law. And at that point, they could have kicked me out. But luckily, they found a stamp in my passport that showed that I had come in legally. And so it was all over. But it was a very long day for me.
And for the very end, what do you think that could be New America's administration relation to Syria? New American President Donald Trump hasn't been paying much attention to that part of the world so far. What do you think? How could that change?
Well, the worst thing is that he has been paying some attention, but in the wrong way. Trump believes that Russia is fighting terrorists in Syria, whereas in fact Russia is joining the regime in bombing civilians and the moderate Syrian rebels. So Trump has got things upside down, and if you look at his first travel ban, he was blocking all Syrians forever. Now the latest travel ban has modified that, but I don't think Trump understands things. I don't think he's making much of an effort to understand things.
Is that opportunity for Russia?
Sorry?
Is that opportunity for Russia?
Well, of course it is. In fact, it's an opportunity for Assad. I think Assad has great hopes for Trump. I think that Trump is capable of making immense mistakes. And I only hope and pray that somebody advises him on what's what. If he read my stories, he would understand at least who's who and who's on which side. But I doubt he's done that. He doesn't read very much. He just watches television.
Thank you very much for this conversation, Mr. Gutman.
Pleasure.
Poštovani gledaoci, bio je to novinar i publicista Roy Gutman. Ostanite uz N1.